All right, what is going on, everybody? We are less than 2 weeks away from the NBA regular season, which is crazy. I didn't even really realize it was that close. I've just been kind of focusing on football recently, but yeah, we're less than 2 weeks away from the NBA regular season. So I'm going to put out my Eastern Conference and Western Conference standings predictions. So let me know what you guys think. Sorry for the Washington Wizards being blocked by my face cam right now, but who really cares about the Wizards anyway? All right. Starting off with the Eastern Conference, I think the Boston Celtics will be the number one seed in the East. I mean, we know that they added Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis in the offseason, which was kind of shocking. I mean, they were in the finals 2 years ago, and they lost in 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. That's not really a recipe for making huge roster changes, but the Celtics thought that's what was best for them. And I'm inclined to agree. I mean, Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis are two really good players. They did lose Marcus Smart, Grant Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and Robert Williams III, which is a decent amount of depth that they lost. And obviously, we all know that they signed Jaylen Brown to the largest contract in NBA history, $300 million. Their starting lineup, I don't think anyone in the NBA can compete with them. Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis. You also have like Al Horford coming off the bench, Peyton Pritchard, but they did lose a lot of depth from last year. So that's their big maybe question mark. The health of their big men. Kristaps Porzingis has been injury prone throughout his career, even though he was pretty healthy last year. I think he played about 65 games and had an almost all-star level campaign. And Al Horford's like 37, 38 years old, so a little bit worried about that. But at the end of the day, this Boston Celtics team I think is going to play hard all season and just barely squeak out the number one seed over the other big threat in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks. We all know that the Milwaukee Bucks made the blockbuster Damian Lillard trade this offseason, kind of coming out of nowhere, took him right out of the jaws of the Miami Heat, who really thought that they were going to get Damian Lillard, and they made another nice little free agency addition in Malik Beasley, but they did lose Drew Holiday, obviously, who was a major component of their championship in 2021. They lost Grayson Allen and a lot of other depth pieces in that Damian Lillard trade. They were able to retain their big guys, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, and a nice depth piece in Jay Crowder. I don't really know who the starting shooting guard is going to be for this team, but you know that your starting lineup is going to be something like Damian Lillard, Pat Connaughton, or Malik Beasley, and then you have Chris Middleton, Giannis, and Brook Lopez. It is, I think, just a little tier worse than the Boston Celtics starting lineup, and their depth is pretty comparable to them, so these two super teams are going to be battling for the top of the Eastern Conference for sure. It doesn't really matter who you have at 1 and who you have at 2. Honestly, I don't really know, but I gave the Celtics the slight edge. And number 3, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers. This offseason, they made a nice little trade in acquiring Max Strus from the Miami Heat, and they also signed Gorgeous Niang, who is the all-time wins leader as of right now for the 2020s decade. I saw that stat a little while ago. So that means the Cleveland Cavaliers have to be good. They have the minivan on their team. They did lose Cedi Osman this year, but he honestly wasn't that good for the Cavaliers anyway last season, and they were able to retain Caris LeVert. So they made some moves around the edges. The big question mark is whether Evan Mobley and Jared Allen can live up to the big stage. They both struggled heavily against the Knicks in round 1 of the postseason last year. I mean, when you have 2 7-footers on the court at once, you shouldn't be getting out-rebounded by Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson. I do think Evan Mobley is going to take a leap as a defender, rebounder, and offensive player, while everyone else on their team just starts gelling together a little bit more. The extra shooting for Max Strus will be nice, and Niang for that matter. I think the Cavaliers are going to rebound in the regular season at least, and get a lot of wins in the regular season. At the 4 spot, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. You know, there's a lot of controversy going on with the James Harden situation right now. I'm not exactly sure how that will be resolved, but under the impression that James Harden is still a Philadelphia 76er, I do think they can squeak out enough wins to be the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, obviously depending on if Joel Embiid is healthy. They made another few nice depth moves this offseason. Kelly Oubre Jr. is a nice bench scorer. Mo Bamba can provide a jolt off the bench. Patrick Beverley and Danny Green for some veteran defense, smart IQ kind of things. They lost Niang, Shake Milton, and Jalen McDaniels, but none of those are huge losses for this team. And they re-signed B-Ball Paul, obviously their best player. Like I said, I mean, I don't really know how this James Harden thing is going to work out, but as long as you have the MVP of the league on your team in Joel Embiid, they should be fine enough to be a good regular season team before they inevitably choke in the playoffs again. For the 5th seed, I have my hometown New York Knicks. And I don't think this is a biased ranking at all. I mean, they were the 5th seed last year, and they didn't really make too many changes. They added Dante DiVincenzo, which is a good player. I think he's a really underrated player, actually. And they did lose Obi Toppin, which is I'm a little bit upset about that. But the way that Tom Thibodeau coaches, he really was never going to get any more than 16 to 18 minutes a game. So I can't be too heartbroken about the loss of Obi Toppin. And the midseason trade we made to get Josh Hart, he was a absolutely vital part of our team last year, so a good thing that we locked him up for a few more years. Not too much to say about the Knicks. I mean, Julius Randle, he's on and off, but Jalen Brunson is the truth, so I think the 5 seed is the right spot for the New York Knicks. At the 6 seed, I have the losers of the Damian Lillard sweepstakes, and that is the Miami Heat. They did add Josh Richardson and Thomas Bryant this offseason, but they did lose out on Max Strus, who they traded to the Cavs, Gabe Vincent, who signed with the Lakers, Victor Oladipo signed with the Thunder, and they lost out on Damian Lillard. I'm counting that as a subtraction. It seemed so just known to everyone that Damian Lillard was going to be a Heat player in the 2023-2024 season, but he's not, and even worse, he's on one of the top contenders in the Eastern Conference with the Milwaukee Bucks. They were able to re-sign Kevin Love. I mean, Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, and Bam Adebayo, that's still obviously a playoff team in my opinion, but they don't seem to be in the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference this season, and I would be shocked if they make it past the second round of the playoffs this upcoming season. For the 7th spot, I have the Atlanta Hawks. They were a little bit disappointing last year, going 41-41, maybe one of the most mid teams of all time, to be honest. There was like a stretch of games for like 30 or 40 games that they were within one game of 500 last season. They didn't make too many big moves. They signed Wesley Matthews and Patty Mills, some nice veterans. They got Kobe Buffkin in the draft. They did lose John Collins, which I think they sold really, really low on him. I find it hard to believe that there wasn't more value out there somewhere else, but Danny Ainge finessed himself, a really nice player in John Collins, and they were able to retain DeJounte Murray, so that trade wasn't a total failure, but I still don't like the fit between Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. It seems just like neither one of them are great off-ball players. At least Trae Young is not a willing off-ball player, and they still have a good roster around them. I like that they finally got rid of Nate McMillan and they signed Quinn Snyder to be their next coach. He's a really, really good coach. I mean, they probably sneak into the playoffs once again, but they just seem like a bottom-tier playoff team in the Eastern Conference. And with the 8th seed, I have the Brooklyn Nets, and this is not as dire of a situation as the Atlanta Hawks. Yes, they're a bottom-tier Eastern Conference playoff team, but they have a much brighter future than the Atlanta Hawks, which is kind of crazy considering how the Big Three era in Brooklyn ended. They pretty much just added Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead in the draft this offseason. They lost Joe Harris, Seth Curry, Patty Mills, just too much money to pay those guys on a mid-tier Brooklyn Nets team, but they were able to re-sign Cameron Johnson on like a 4-year, $72 million contract, and I really, really liked that signing for them. Cameron Johnson is a really nice starting level player in the NBA. Mikal Bridges is going to be maybe a top 25, 30-ish player for the Brooklyn Nets this year. And we're even seeing the yearly Ben Simmons hype getting back on that train, so maybe he's something, probably he's not. But the Brooklyn Nets have a solid team, you know, Mikal, Spencer Dinwiddie, Nicholas Claxton. I mean, they have a solid team. Maybe they get the 8th seed, maybe they don't make the playoffs, maybe they lose 2 play-in games, but it's a solid team in Brooklyn. For the 9th seed, I have the Orlando Magic. I think they're going to make the leap this year. They didn't make any huge additions once again. They signed Anthony Black and Jet Howard from the draft, and I think they signed Joe Ingles as well this offseason. And they only lost Bol. They re-signed Mo Wagner. It's a very similar team to last year. But I think that another year of Franz Wagner development, another year of Paolo Banchero development, the rest of their team is solid. I mean, Wendell Carter Jr., Markelle Fultz, Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs. They have a very deep team of young guys. And if maybe half of those young guys take the next step, I think they can leap into the play-in tournament. And the 10th seed in the play-in tournament is going to be the Chicago Bulls. They still have Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, but I honestly don't know if both of them are going to make it through this season. They didn't make any huge moves signing Javon Carter and Torrey Craig. They lost a few guys. They did re-sign Nikola Vucevic and Kobe White, and Ayo Dosunmu, I guess. But with Lonzo Ball not being on the team once again for the 2023-2024 season, there just isn't enough around the Chicago team, around Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, for them to make really anything of a push into the playoffs, in my opinion. The 11th seed is going to be the Toronto Raptors. They added Dennis Schroeder, Jalen McDaniels, and they got Grady Dick in the draft, who I really like coming into the NBA, but they obviously did lose Fred VanVleet while retaining Gary Trent Jr. and Jakob Poeltl. I mean, Pascal Siakam, he's a great player. In my top 25 players in the NBA video coming out soon, you will see that I did give him some respect in that top 25 list, but I just don't think he can cut it as a number one option. And with his number two option going out the door, I think this Toronto Raptors team is going to struggle once again in the 2023 to 2024 season. Is Siakam even a Toronto Raptor by the end of the season? I don't know. Is Gary Trent Jr. a Toronto Raptor at the end of the season? I don't know. I am not very high on the Toronto Raptors, and I have them in the 11th seed. And then finally, the last team I'm going to go over in depth is the Indiana Pacers at the 12th spot. I wanted to find a way to sneak them into the play-in tournament, but I just don't think it's going to happen unless the Raptors trade Siakam and the Bulls trade DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine. I like their offseason moves. Bruce Brown, a little bit too big of a contract for my liking, but he's a very, very nice player to have on a rebuilding team. Obi Toppin they got for very little value from the New York Knicks, and that was an amazing pull for them. And I like their draft pick in Jarace Walker. They lost Chris Duarte, who I think has been quite disappointing in the NBA, and a few other depth guys while re-signing Tyrese Haliburton to the rookie Supermax extension. Tyrese Haliburton is a top 25 player in the NBA. They have some interesting pieces around it. Benedict Mathurin is a nice scoring guy. Obi Toppin and Jarace Walker at that power forward rotation. Miles Turner is still a really, really good defender, one of the best in the entire NBA. I like the future of the Indiana Pacers, but I still think they're probably 1 year away. And then rounding out, here's the kind of all my standings laid out. Rounding out the bottom three spots, I have Detroit at 13. Cade Cunningham is going to take a leap, but I just still don't think there's enough around him. Washington's going to be at 14. I mean, they don't have a good team, but at least there is not as much turmoil in Washington as there is in Charlotte. And because of all the turmoil in Charlotte, I have them at the 15th overall spot. Let me know what you guys think, and stay tuned for the Western Conference iteration of this video that's going to be coming out on Monday. Peace.